Okay, here it is. If you don't grasp any other concept this entire semester, this is the one. Okay? Chapter 2 is what we're talking about. It's about how we critique art, how we talk about whether we like it or we don't like it, why, when we look at intellectually, look at it objectively and say, okay, this is why I think they did this, etc., all of that. Apollonian is the intellectual, objective analysis of art. It's when you're going to take whatever it is you're critiquing and look at it and say, okay, it doesn't matter if I like it or didn't like it, I'm going to break this down. What do I think this is about? How did the artist do this particular thing? What is the message that they're trying to send? What are the techniques that they used? What genre does this fit into? Depending on the art form, it's going to be different things. If it was painting, you might be talking about brush strokes or the medium they used in terms of like oil paint, watercolor, whatever. If it's realistic, does it fit into a particular school of art? Is it, pointillism or impressionism or surrealism or whatever? Lots of isms in visual art. If it's a movie, you're going to talk about the directing, the acting, the sets, the costumes, the cinematography, like why things are structured the way they are. With music, you're looking at lyrics, tempo, rhythm, all of those, melody, harmony, all those kinds of things, okay? Where you're really trying to get at how this thing was put together, why they did it the way they did it, all of that stuff. Apollo was the god of the sun. It's about illumination, intellect, exposing all the details, all of that kind of thing. If you know your Greek mythology, Dionysus was the god of wine and revelry and fertility and all of the fun stuff, right? So Dionysian analysis is what you're going to do when you look at it and go, okay, this is what it made me feel. It made me angry. It made me sad. It made me laugh. It scared the crap out of me, whatever it is, okay? So, let's take the clip that I posted from I Am Legend, which is a great movie, by the way. If you haven't seen this movie and you like movies of this kind, you definitely need to see this, okay? So the clip that I put on there is, about halfway through the movie or so? And as you saw, he's out riding around and he gets tricked by these zombie things. If you haven't seen the movie, basically they tried to cure cancer, I believe, by creating a virus that would kind of work against it, and they used the rabies virus to base it on, which then, with science fiction, science goes horribly awry, and it turns everybody into zombies. And he's the only person left who isn't one, as far as we know. So he goes out, he gets tricked, then the scary zombie dogs come and attack his dog, Sam. Alright, so the first thing I want to mention about this scene is something that happened to me when I saw this movie in the movie theater. When the dog gets attacked and he realizes it's hurt, for the first time he calls the dog not Sam, but Samantha. When I saw this, and y'all are going to think I'm a weirdo, but I kind of am a weirdo. I get very emotional about movies and stuff. I just burst into tears. It had never occurred to me that the dog was a girl. Not that I'd really thought about it one way or the other, but I think I just assumed the dog was a boy, right? He'd call the dog Sam. I don't know. And so I just burst into tears. For some reason, the fact that it was a girl, sorry guys, I don't mean this to be like, guys aren't worth getting upset about, but I think it was because the dog came from his daughter. When his wife and daughter were evacuated, and we're assuming they're dead now, or zombies or whatever, the dog was just a puppy, and his daughter gave it to him to keep him company. And so that was his last link to his daughter. It was just something about that. And I have to believe that that was done on purpose. They didn't just call the dog Sam and then just all of a sudden right then decide to say Samantha. That was on purpose to get at people who are big weirdos like me who cry about silly stuff in movies. So that's what I mean by, you can say, I have this emotional reaction. Well, why? And then you can use your Apollonian analysis to kind of break it down. Why did I react in that way to it? And then fast forward, he takes the dog back to his lab, tries to give her a vaccine that he's hoping will help. And then he starts to realize she's going to change and there's nothing he can do about it. He can't stop it. And it's really horrible. And, I hate to, depress everybody. But, then he realizes he's going to have to kill her. Otherwise, she's going to rip his throat out. Or something else equally horrible. When the moment comes that he has to do it, and we're assuming he strangles her or something like that, all you see is his face. You know what he's doing, because you can, from the sounds, from the ways, you know what's going on. But you're not watching that. You're watching his face. Why? Is it just because the director didn't want to show a dog getting killed? He didn't have any trouble with showing the dog's body being, basically laid to the side later. I think it's because what's important is not seeing the dog die. What's important is seeing what it's doing to him to have to do it. To see up close how much pain this is causing him to have to do this. And so the director said, we're going to get right up on your face and watch that emotional torture that he has to do to survive. So this is what I mean by, digging into it. Why is it that way? Why did they, decide to choose that particular music at that moment or frame the shot in the way that they did? That's Apollonian analysis. And then Dionysian is what it made you feel and why. A good example I always use is the movie John Q. with Denzel Washington. Which if you haven't seen it, it's basically about the healthcare system. And his son needs a heart transplant, but because they don't have a lot of money and don't have great insurance, he can't get one. And, Denzel goes a little nuts. That movie pisses me off. Because I'm just like, this is so unfair. And that's the point. That's what they were trying to do, is they're trying to say to us, look, yes, this movie is entertaining, and the performances are great, and it's interesting and engaging, but the point of that is to say, look at how screwed up our healthcare system is. So that's basically Apollonian Dionysian analysis. You're going to do your poem next week. A couple people have already done it, but if you haven't, it's in the assignments tab. It's a very specific poem. And then you're going to do a song critique. Then you're going to do the movie. And then you're going to pick something at the end to do. And each time I expect it to get a little more detailed, a little more in-depth, as you learn to kind of delve into these things. So that's why I said in the introduction announcement, I'm not interested in what other critics say. I really just want to know what you think about it, what your Apollonian and Dionysian methods of analysis come up with. Okay? And just a little tidbit, for those of you who, I hate to be spoiler alert, my husband hates nothing worse in the world than ruining a book or a movie, but I'm going to talk a little bit about the ending of I Am Legend. And the movie's been out a long time, so the statute of limitations is passed on that. If you've seen it, then you know, and maybe if you don't want to know, you can turn it off now. Basically, he discovers he's not the only normal human left. He runs into this woman and a child. and he's going to go with them. They're headed towards this like army encampment where there are a bunch of normal people safely behind walls, and he's going to go with them. But then, of course, the what hits the fan and things go badly, and he basically has to sacrifice himself to let them escape. But before he does, he gives them a vial, because he's immune, so he's been using his own blood and everything to come up with a vaccine, and he thinks he's done that. So he gives it to them so they can take it to the compound and save humanity. And so that's where the title comes in. I Am Legend. He didn't survive, but his contribution to saving humanity will never be forgotten. And this is actually when we get to the chapter on death and life affirmation towards the end of the semester. This is what you would call magnifying and beautifying death, where you die, but your death means something. It had a purpose. Well, interestingly, this was based on a book that was written, decades ago. And I've read the book. And actually, I listened to the book on CD. It's very different. It's in California. He's not a scientist. He's just a schmo that worked in a factory and was... in the book, they're not zombies, they're vampires. And he was bitten by a vampire bat when he was in South America with the army or something, and that's why he's immune. But there's all these really creepy scenes where, like, he buries his wife because she dies, and she keeps clawing her way back up out of the grave and coming back and knocking on the door. It's very creepy. The dog is just a stray dog that he tries to, like, entice into his house, because he's so lonely. He is trying to find a cure, but he doesn't have any special knowledge or skills to do that with. So what eventually he finds out is that there's basically two kinds of vampires. There's sort of one level where they're not real bright, and they're just basically, they come out at night, they're sort of almost like a zombie. Do you know what I mean? Like, they just are not intelligent. And then there's a whole other kind that are basically like humans. They're just like we think of the traditional vampire. They're very smart. They're, have society, they have whatever. They just do it at nighttime. And they've established their own world where they have schools, they have policemen, they have everything we had during the daytime, but they have it at night. And they're after him because he is the last human alive. Excuse me. So eventually, they capture him, and they're going to execute him. And in the very last scene of the book, he's in his cell, looking down at, like, the square where they've got the scaffolding where they're going to execute him. And he sees how afraid they are of him because he's different, because they think he might, harm them. And all of a sudden he has this realization that just like vampires used to be just a story that people told kids to be scary, or we watched movies about it to be scary, they were just a legend. And now they're the ones with society, and he's going to be the legend that they tell their little vampire kids about as scary stories into the future. So, same title, same basic plot line, but a very different concept. I mean, even the title references in a different way, right? But that's something, if the title to the movie or the book or the whatever you're analyzing is significant, that's another thing you might look at. All right, so I think that covered what I wanted to cover. when you do your poem, I am not expecting, you know, this giant analysis. A paragraph or two is fine, okay? With your song, it'll need to be a little bit longer. And then your Stranger Than Fiction paper, after you watch the movie, is going to be a lot more involved. So basically, we're just we're taking baby steps as we work up to this kind of analysis, okay? If you have any questions about that, just let me know. I'm happy to help. And I am going to do one more video, but it's probably not going to be tonight because I'm tired. And I'll try to do it tomorrow if I can, okay? All right, folks. Let me know if you need anything.